Good evening, good night, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are in the world. You have just seen the mighty Nearco winning the Grand Prix de Paris in 1938. Nearco was bred and owned by Senatore Federico Tesio and Marchese Mario Incisa della Rocchetta under the banner of Razza d'Ormello Giatta. Nearco, unbeaten with his progeny, changed the world of thoroughbred for sure. And you should bear in mind that his progeny changed the world of thoroughbred. This evening, I have the honor and the pleasure to host a very important person. I say a living legend in British racing is Mr. Jim McGrath. Jim, welcome to the program.
Carlo, nice to see you.
Jim means Timeform because he has been associated for a long time with the Timeform. The Timeform was founded by a gentleman, a mathematician called Phil Bull, who was also an advisor for breeding for the late great bookmaker William Hale. I have to say that I had the great privilege to meet Phil Bull in 1977 for the King George won by the Minstrel because I was the chairman of the Italian Association of Young Race Gores. We were associated with the race gore in England, Anthony Fairbanks and Louis Gold. So we had a meeting, we visited the parliament, we have a dinner party, and I was sitting just in the middle between Phil Bull and Anthony Fairbanks. So, Jim, as I said, you have been associated with the Timeform for a long time, but this is an occasion to explain our watchers what exactly the Timeform is, how it started, and so on.
Well, Carlo, Phil Bull dealt in facts, so let's stick to facts. Your very generous introduction is factually correct up to a point. I joined Timeform in 1974. I left in 2009, so I haven't worked for Timeform since February 2009. I did a variety of roles, but my principal role was to act as the eyes, if you like, one of 3 or 4 people that work full-time on the track, assessing horses and passing on opinions for the Timeform system, which Phil Bull began in 1948. He worked closely with a gentleman who'll be well known to people of your vintage and mine, called Dick Whitford, who was a very important part in it being established. And basically, he wanted to establish a mathematical link to a horse's performance based on the time of the race a horse recorded, as well as more conventionally, what we call collateral form. Horse A beating horse B by so many lengths and taking into account the weight carried. So it was a more sophisticated way of looking at basic data.
Yes, it was great because we had a book, the black book, every week. Then we had the final flat issue at the end, towards the end of October, beginning of November. And then we had that great big book called Racehorses of, let's say, the year 2000, 2001. Unfortunately, this publication, you can't find this publication anymore because they stopped. And this is, I think, is very bad because people like myself and many other we are missing this publication weekly at the end of October and the big book.
I agree with that. I mean, as I say, I left in 2009, so it's quite a long time ago. But obviously, Timeform was my roots. Anything worthwhile that I know about racing, I had a short spell trying to become a jockey when I was 16, but with no background or practical background, that was never going to happen. So anything I've learned of worth in racing, and it was that course of a journey that gave me a chance to work in broadcasting has come from working at Timeform. And to go right up to the point, the last 3, I think we've been missing it 3 years now. I miss its subjective end of season look. You don't always agree with everything that Timeform writes, including me, but usually its findings are based on solid fact and dispensing with any half-baked theories or half-baked opinions, and one way or the other, it made you think. You either agreed with it or you disagreed with it, or it made you anticipate, etc., etc.
But the very important part of the Timeform, if you look at one horse, is the conformation, the breeding, if he's going, if he prefers the good going, the soft going, the firm going. All these information are missing now unless you subscribe to the Timeform online. But not everybody can do that. Or if you buy the Timeform card when you go racing. Myself, for instance, I download the Timeform when I need it for the big meetings.
Well, for me, it's a start. Whether I'm working on television, going for pleasure, or working in another capacity, which I do from time to time, analysing a particular horse for a certain person. Start there and work. And you go through all the detail. I do. The Timeform might say one thing. I'll try and look at that and say yes, no, I don't agree with this, or check that. And then having a solid base opinion enables you to either strengthen, in most cases, strengthen your own opinion, starting from that point. So I've always found it a very good starting point.
Anyway, you work with Phil Bull, I think.
Sorry?
You work with Phil Bull.
Yes, well, a little bit. I joined in 74. Phil Bull died in the mid-80s. Sorry, I think he was 86 actually, but I stand to be corrected on that. I should know, but I'm not 100% certain. So it's fair to say I didn't see the best of him. He always had his own personal assistants. For example, Jeff Greetham, who was still writing the Timeform manuals and editing them right up until they ceased 2 or 3 years ago, was one of his early assistants. Also, Graham Rock, who went on to help found the Racing Post, was another one. They're leading names in racing journalism. So I wasn't directly his assistant, but I worked directly on the track. So you'd form, having been trained in the office for 4 or 5 years, you're then let loose on the track to give opinions about horses and what you think they might or might not do. And my goodness me, he used to go through those with a tooth comb and telephone you or tell you at the track what he thought you'd got wrong. Not very often what he thought you got right.
But anyway, Phil Bull was a character and was a great panther also.
Yes, he was. Because he took a logical and mathematical approach to betting. I mean, most people lose at betting because they have too many bets. A lot of people that like racing have a feel for it or an initiative for it, and they're quite capable of backing a winner. But alongside that, they back far too many losers. They don't eliminate. And Phil Bull's line of thinking was, the important factors such as the going first, then factors such as draw, inform, rider, etc., etc., etc. The number of there are many variables in racing, as you know well, and trying to pick horses that had the fewest of those.
I remember Phil Bull very well on the race course with his long beard, with the stick or with the umbrella, approaching the bookmaker, holding the Timeform card and placing bets. I remember especially with my old friend Dickie Gaskell that he used to work for Ladbrokes, and then you probably met him. So I have to say that Phil Bull was a legendary figure in racing in the UK because of what he did with the Timeform and then what he did for William Hill. If you remember, he was his consultant for breeding for William Hill.
Yes, yes, I know he was very good friends with him, and they worked the breeding side of of William Hill's operation, which I think was Whitsbury Stud. He played an important part in that. He was an amazing character, and obviously he left a fantastic legacy in the shape of Timeform, which, if it hadn't been any good, wouldn't be alive today, but it's still alive and going strong. It has slightly different aims now. I mean, it covers handicaps all over the world. They don't, the people running it don't place as much importance on physical appearance and paddock notes, whereas, you know, when I was heavily involved, and we would have 4 full-time race reporters going to all the main meetings. I don't think they use their manpower in the same way nowadays. But you know, when Phil Ball was alive, they didn't handicap races in Hong Kong. Timeform didn't handicap races in Australia, all and America. All that's done now. You can get a Timeform opinion on all major races anywhere in the world.
Now we have a break, not a very long one. Stay with us. Don't go away. You say that now the Timeform people, they don't pay a lot of attention to conformation and to physical aspect of the horses. But for instance, our mutual friend, David Cleary, who by the way is our president of the Horse Racing Writers and Photographer Association, is always in the paddock taking notes about the horses, how they behave, how they look.
Yes, well, David is the only one who works anywhere near a full-time basis. Before, when I worked there, David was doing that. I was doing that. Graham Cunningham was doing that. Simon Walker was doing that. Colin Russell was doing that. There were 4 full-timers most days from a pool of about 6 people.
But nowadays, if you have to advise race goers to use the Timeform, what you can say to them, how that they should use the Timeform when they go racing?
Well, the same way as Phil Bull used to use it. I mean, we used to get asked a question. When you went for an interview at Timeform, you could be Oxford educated with a degree, but it didn't matter that. He obviously wanted people who were intelligent, hopefully, educated to a high standard, great, because that usually meant they could write. But the important thing was, how much did they know about racing? And to him, the common sense things were, there were simple questions like, what's the most important thing you need to know before you have a bet? So what would you, if I asked you that at your Timeform interview, what would you say?
Oh, yes. No, I have to say that I use the Timeform mainly because I have all the information about the horses straight away, the pedigree, how did they run in the last race or something. And then, of course, there is a rating. A rating, you can rate a horse 100, I can rate it 95, another one that can rate 102.
Yeah, no, Carly, A, you're avoiding the question, which is very naughty of you, but B, the simple place he would say was, it doesn't matter whether it's rated 100 or it's rated 95, if it wants firm ground and the ground's soft, it won't be running to anything like either of those 2 figures. So the most important thing for him, and I mean this, the first thing, what is the ground? We always talk that. So horses transmit their ability through their legs. How they balance, how they use them is dependent totally on the ground. And, you know, in the case of courses like Epsom, the nature of the track, etc. So that's one. If you're looking at sprints, where is your horse drawn? Where's the pace? Simple things like that. The question of its chance in the race is dependent on those. So it doesn't matter if it's 95 or 90. If the simple things that we're suggesting, and there are others as well, aren't in place, it won't show its form.
This is the key, and I'm very pleased that you arrive at the point. When I write articles or when I do the radio, the first thing that I tell my readers or people listening to the radio, have a look at the state of the ground. There is the turf tracks, which is a fantastic site where if you log into the turf track, you got the map of the tracks with all the all the state of the ground, soft going to good to soft, and then this is fantastic because where I live in Italy, unfortunately, if you go to a betting shop now or if you go online, you don't find any information at all about the ground. Sometimes they say leggermente pesante, that means slightly soft, or they don't, nobody pays attention to the ground. And when I say nobody, I'm saying the bookmakers and the punters. And as I'm writing more or less 3 articles a week, and when I talk about the big races, I will write for the Irish Oaks. And then the first thing to do, as you say, have a look at the state of the going, because as you say, a horse is rated 100, but if he likes firm ground and the ground is soft, he will not perform at 100. Unfortunately, in this country, nobody pays attention to that. I had Eddie Fremantle on show the other day, and he explained that he walks the course every time that he goes racing, just to understand how the ground is, what is the best part of the race, all these things.
Yeah, well, that's why he's been able to continue making a living. And Eddie he's always looking for value. So when you're backing horses that are largely ignored by a lot of people because they might seem out of form, Eddie's looking for situations. Yes, but this one, it's been out of form. But today, because I've walked the track, I know it's running on ground that will suit it, and it's drawn on the right side as well. So he's got his own way of looking at things. Like anyone else in the game, he works very hard at it, and he has his routines beforehand, and they lead him on quite a number of occasions a season to situations where he can profit where other people don't.
Ben, and also the bookmakers, they have their, in bracket, inspectors on course, if you wish, that they try to understand how the going is, talking to the jockeys, talking to the trainers, and reporting to the trading room most of the time, because the going is the most important thing when you start studying a race.
Well, Carlo, I feel hugely that racing's changed enormously in Britain now. I mean, the bookmakers to which you're referring, you're talking about on-course bookmakers. Yeah, they might report to the trading rooms still, but not like they did maybe 10, 15 years ago, because a lot of the big so-called bookmakers, they're not bookmakers, they're betting operators. They're not making a book on their opinion on each race. They're essentially looking for mugs by encouraging them, and why not? It's business. You know, you can have 7 places with us. Well, that's not a mathematically sound equation, and they know that. But they want repeat customers. They don't want big hitters who might know a bit. They want people who are in it maybe only short term, but will repeat and repeat and repeat, and they keep them on the line with extra places and things like that.
The final question, Jim, if you remember, last year we had a conversation about the thoroughbred, if the thoroughbred nowadays are leveling up or leveling down, because there are different opinions. What do you think?
Ooh, I think when you asked me this last time, I can't imagine what a definitive answer is. Your show opens with Niarco, yeah?
Yes.
Yes, who, as you rightly go on to say, is one of the most important horses in the history of the thoroughbred. I mean, if we go back in time, we go to Flying Childers and then to Eclipse, and further down the line we go to I don't know, Hyperion, Sadler's Wells, Galileo, etc., Dubawi, etc., etc. Essentially, a thoroughbred has to have a minimum of 8 generations of thoroughbred parentage recorded. One of the 68, I think it is, thoroughbred constituencies around the world to be a thoroughbred. If it hasn't got those 8, a minimum of 8, it can't be a thoroughbred. So it's essentially a hybrid, and it's streamlined. And maybe there must come a time where the scope for it continuing to develop might start to run out. If what you all might mean, or could be inferred from what you're saying, is it more shared out internationally now? I mean, a look at the 2013 Longines rankings. Obviously, we don't have any for 2014 yesterday. Sorry, we don't have any for 2024 at the moment. But if we go to 2023 and you look at the top 30 performances on a racetrack, around the world, I think 5 took place in Great Britain, though one of those was French and 3 of them were Irish. 5 took place in Japan, 4 took place in France, 6 took place in Hong Kong, which I think is the most ever. 3 in Ireland, although Irish ones are also in the British number, and 5 were American. So you could say it's hugely shared out. Now, they're all major racing countries, but Hong Kong isn't a major breeding country. For all its racing is wonderful. It's sort of designer racing, isn't it? The horses are nearly all imported from New Zealand or Australia, and then of course from Europe as well. So it's been improving. So it's not exactly a surprise that some of their very good geldings are now ranking regularly amongst the top performers. Has it leveled off? I don't think the standard in Britain, and I can't explain to you why, is as strong as it was. I mean, I could say to you, if Coolmore didn't have any runners, or the main constituents of the group that we know as the lads, if they didn't have any horses in England, run in England, what would it be like? You come to England all the time. What would the racing look like without the, if you like, Irish participation?
Of course, it would be a disaster. But anyway, I'm thinking, and then we go to the end, that is leveling up, as you mentioned, the lads. That means John Magnin, that in my opinion is a genius, and he sent mares to Japan, because too many Galileo mare, of course, he had to make a choice. Instead of sending them to America, he decided to send them to Japan. And it was extremely successful, if you think Auguste Rodin, Saxon Warrior, all these horses. So that means that the quality is going up and up all the time. This is my feeling. You might disagree, but as you say, it's not easy to say if it's going up or it's going down.
No, it's just that I don't see, if I ask you the question, I suppose truly great horses come only once every lifetime.
Yes.
And in Britain, I mean, is Baid a truly great horse? I could argue the toss with 1 or 2 people on that, but a lot of people think he is. But for me, Frankel is the last great horse in Britain, and
yes.
That's not to say there haven't been others elsewhere since. I mean, you have Flightline in America, for example. Though he only ran 6 times, he looked an exceptional horse. And you have the top Japanese horse, Equinox, recently looked a fantastic horse. I just feel that since Frankel, with the exception of Baid, you've had an Abel, she's a filly who receives small allowances when she took on colt. She's obviously very good, but you know, I wonder for the strength of British racing, because certainly it's a long time since we've had a really brilliant sprinter in Britain. Some people think Batash was. Again, that's one I'd argue with them. But, you know, I wonder about the quality of racing.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim, for your time. I think it was great. See you soon.
I hope so. Hope to see you next week, Carlo.
Bye.